This is my video on playing a Necromancer. I certainly don't cover it all. There's far too much in this class to do, but I'll give you an overview and my opinion. There'll be things that are right, things that are wrong. There'll be things that can be done differently. That's all there is to it. My current Necromancer is group geared, the one I'm playing on Bristlebane, and he is 115. He hasn't got all those augs done. He hasn't got all those progressions done. I did do the 4 TOV missions to give him the 7% damage aug, but he hasn't done much else besides that. Oh, he does have a lot of his important DPS AAs done. So the first thing I'm going to talk about will be the Necromancer burns. They're fairly important. People like to know about them. They're fun. They're also one of the areas that most people agree Necromancers are pretty good at. Certainly right now in rating, they're often at the top of the charts. And their burns aren't that complicated, to be honest. Again, this is how I do burns. Probably not all going to be completely. We don't use the epic anymore because they've deprecated that. I'm going with the COV group two-handed arcane staff right now. That adds a little damage. But we no longer get that 18% innate crit bonus. What that means is we're limited to a 62% innate crit bonus. And so we just need to get 38% more to hit 100, which 100 is the cap. One of the items as a working Necromancer you want to do is do the run to get your chess piece from Matamuram. There's no real reason to get the epic now, but it's still worth doing that run to get this chess piece because it'll give you a 40% 6-tick crit bonus. And that's huge. That's going to put you your 100% by itself. There are a lot of other things that affect your crit bonus. And there's a lot of things that you would think would affect it that don't, because you have to be careful. It's a lot of things will affect nukes, but they won't affect dots. The Bard Epic, Bard Fierce Eye, Enchanter Illusion of Grandeur, Ranger Auspice, Intensity of the Resolute AA, Glyph of Destruction, Spire of the Necromancer. Those do impact dot crit rates, so they're great. You want to be aware of those. And, you know, who's in your group, when are they going to be using these various buffs, so you can decide whether you want to use one of your own, Intensity Resolute, Glyph of Destruction, Spire of the Necromancer, or your robe click. The key is to figure out how to get it 100% or very close to 100% when you're doing your primary burn, and then just keep yourself at 100% as long as you are being effective. As long as you are burning, doing your main dots, and kind of balance out how long they refresh, you know, what your plan is for the evening, that type of thing. There's going to be a lot of other things, boosters besides the crit bonus. So you want to get the crit bonus to 100%. Then you have, you know, damage boosters, Hand of Death, and Funeral Pyre. You can stack those during your burn. I usually do. They do seem to stack. I've tested them. Together they bump up the damage even more. Or you can stagger them. It's just going to depend on what you're doing. You've got your faster cast time. I run Tribute most of the time, Twinge of Pain, but I don't have the Raid leg pants. If I did, I would probably call 48% good enough, you know, with Torment plus the Raid pants, and I wouldn't use Twinge of Pain for that extra 2%. I just don't think it'd make any difference. You're going to want to use your resist modifier, Scent of Thule, Focus Arcanum perhaps, because named mobs, raid mobs, and even trash in COV will resist. Heretic's Twin Cast, you can time that. You really don't want to cast that right when you're laying down your dots, I wouldn't think, because that would use up your dot ticks, and you only have 20 of them, and I'd rather them go on Pyre or Venom or Oblivion or one of your big nukes. It's the same with Gathering Dusk. That only lasts for 24 seconds, and it's going to give you additional damage during that time. So you want to trigger it after you've laid down your big dots. Then it'll hopefully get the maximum benefit for the full run. In order to understand modern day necro burns, you're going to want to understand your wound line. And anytime you have a burn that's going to go at 2 minutes and longer, then you can lay down wounds and you can really enhance your DPS. Wounds are special spells in that they last 1 minute and 36 seconds if you're not having any worn focus to increase them. Once that 1 minute and 36 seconds goes, they go into proliferation mode. And in proliferation mode, they can do up to 4 million plus a tick. Quite often 1 million, 2 million, 3 million. It's really excellent DPS. But they're special. Again, a lot of times you stagger when you do your burns for when the proliferation starts. So you might hold off on doing Hand of Death or Funeral Pyre until your wounds have started to flicker on and off. You know they're going to go into proliferation phase. Then you would do the damage boosters to try and boost those up. They definitely will boost them up. As I said, I've got 4.1 million tick procs on some of my wounds when they're proliferating in my group gear to kind of show the damage. This is one run of some of my wounds when I was burning, and you see I'm getting 4.1 million, 1.5 million, 1 million. So then 3, it's just tremendous damage. This shows the real value of those. And again, that's when I'm burning, so they're being quite boosted. My particular spell lineup when I'm burning, obviously, number one, I have Assert for Blood. That's just an amazing ability with that synergy. It's not a counter type synergy such as Rogues where they do 2 blows and it goes away. It'll be up for the full amount, and if you're in a caster group, you're going to be really helping the entire group's DPS along with your own. Then, of course, Pyre and Grip of Decay are 2 very strong dots. After I lay down my wounds, I will be casting Pyre and Danvid's Grip of Decay. So the rest of my burn line would be, Oblivion, Crystal Crawler, Venom, Pallid Haze, Broiling Shadows, Pyre the Wretched. 9, Frozen Leech is variable. You're just going to put in whatever you think. After you've dropped Pyre of the Wretched, usually I would trigger Gathering Dusk, and that will get the full 24 seconds. Now, if Pyre, for instance, you're going to refresh as necessary these various dots. Some you won't have to refresh very much, if at all, such as your Disease Combination dot. There are a number of spells. Swifts you see come up in comment. Years ago, those were just the be-all and end-all, but they were nerfed. I've run them comparison. I've looked at them, and in my opinion, they really never deserve an entry in your spell lineup. I'm not particularly impressed with the Dissident line of spells right now. They used to be great, but with the revamp, you get so much damage from other abilities. Just looking at what the wounds do, what Pyre does, what Crystal Crawler Venom does, and given the huge mana cost of those, I don't find them particularly impressive, so I don't put them too much in my lineup. When I get this Necro with progression, etc., done, and I have, level 4 of those, I'll recompare. Maybe I'm wrong. Ignite Intellect, I want to use that spell. I've looked at it, I've read it, but in actual performance, I haven't been impressed. I think if you're going with the right mobs where they have lots of mana, so you get the full impact every time, it might earn a space in a spell lineup. But I don't like situational spells too much. I prefer just know what to do. Call Skeleton Horde, great spell. Use it all the time. Don't use it on burns, other than maybe at the end or something. I mean, it's if you can be dotting, you'll do more damage. Um, Also, the old trick of removing your back piece, which is what extends your dots right now, cast your wounds, then put it back on. That still works. There's all sorts of other little things you can do to try and eke out the max damage. But you don't need to. You're going to be doing tremendous damage, even if you don't remove your back piece, even if you don't use Holgrish Elder Beads. So what I'll do is I'll show you just like a guild hall version of me doing the burns. It's not perfect, but you don't have to be perfect to do really high damage as a necromancer. You just have to be decent. Now, this would be a burn when you know it's going to go 2 minutes plus. If it's just going to go for a minute, then you're not going to do the wound lines, and you might mem some additional dots. So I'm going to start my burn. I remove my back piece. I send in my pet. I start laying down my dots, the wounds. As soon as I put my finish my wounds, in this case just 3 wounds, not 4, though 4 will do more damage, I put my back piece on and I begin to lay down my regular dots. In between doing my regular dots, I start triggering my burn hotkeys because they can be cast in between the spell rest period. Now, you'd never want to do wounds twice because that will just reset the timer. And you'll see I've got Chaotic Power procced and the Synergy from casting Assert for Blood. I'm casting it fairly often. It's the guild hall, so it's going to run all the time. There's nothing to do about that. But Chaotic Power will run down because it's a counter type situation. Once I've got all my wounds down, I've got all my dots down, I've triggered all my burn AA abilities, then I'll do Life Burn. And Life Burn, usually I'll have a tap memmed or something to recover if necessary. If you've got a good healer, it won't matter, but that's just one of the things you can do. And, refresh Pyre as it needs to be refreshed, etc. At the same time, you can be hitting Death Bloom and any of these AA abilities. You probably have your Tribute running. You have the Crystal Mana Potion up there. It's a 6-hour potion, which will lower the amount of mana each spell uses. Again, Tribute lowers the mana. You can also just use your group gear or whatever you have. Group gear I think is 17% mana reduction, 22 or 23% mana reduction for the raid gear. And then I gate out just so I can take a look at the parse. So moving on from burning, I'll look at kiting, root rotting, and solo work. And basically, I'm not going to go over this. I'm going to refer you to Endersword's video, Everquest Necro Root Rotting Guide, Great Divide, level 115. That is truly a master class in how to root rot. He's much better than I am, and you'll learn a ton by watching his video. I would say among those comments, kind of just distinguishing AA snare versus spell snare. They're both useful. They have slightly different purposes. Most of the time I go with the AA snare, but the spell snare can be appropriate. It certainly slows the mobs a little bit more. I noticed that Endersword uses Chaotic Miasma. I haven't been impressed with that spell, so I don't use it. There may be a time when it's more appropriate. It's just so far, it just doesn't seem worth it to me. My own personal root rot line is as follows. Obviously, it can change upon the needs. You're always shifting your spell lines just a little bit because there are a lot of different spells and items you can bring in as a necro. especially if you want to try something like Mezzine or Charming Undead, which I don't really address in here. I will point out Mind Erosion. That's kind of a nice little thing. Keeps the mana coming. Shackle is if you want belt and suspenders, just one extra root in case you've used Pestilent Paralysis and it hasn't refreshed yet. So this would be my demonstration of root rotting, though if you've watched Ender Sword's video, this is superfluous. And I'll keep it short because this video is already going to be long enough. As I said, not only will nukes break the root, dots will break the root. So I generally lay down my dots before I use Pestilent Paralysis. But if I've used Scent of Thule, laid my dots in advance, and then I use Pestilent Paralysis, it usually holds. It usually holds the full time. So now that mob is taken care of. It's rotting away. It's dead. I'd be smart here to use Pestilent Paralysis on one mob and then snare the other and then come back and hit the other one later. So the next thing is the group game. That's really the one area where people complain about the weakness of Necromancers. Don't feel sorry for Necromancers right now. They can do really good damage. This is one lineup I've got. It changes depending on what the group needs, but obviously Assert for Blood, Pyre, Grip of Decay, Crystal Crawler Venom, Oblivion are pretty much always in my front line. I always have Skeleton Horde. Mind Erosion is usually up if I'm doing mobs where that's of a benefit. Got my tap, Remote Sphere of Withering. What you're trying to do, if the faster the group is in killing, the harder it's going to be for you to perform as a Necro. But generally what I do is I'll bounce with Assert for Blood. That gets a 30% synergy going. Then I'll hit Pyre. That's it. Then I'll do Call Skeleton Horde. Those three spells alone, cycling those as needed, will put me doing, really good DPS. Now, the next mob comes in, I use Pet Swarm, because Call Skeleton Horde could be very efficient because the mobs will be still up if you're in a fast-killing group. If your mana's fine, then throw in Grip of Decay or Crawler Venom. If you need to ramp up, you've got all these spells memmed, you can use them. In the group game, it really helps if you're the puller. Then what you can do is you can root a mob, run one mob back to camp, dot that mob in camp, run back, drop some wounds on the mob that's cooking, pull another mob, bring it to camp, go dot another mob with wounds, and you can start being, tremendously effective. There's a lot Necros can do, and if you're a puller, a group former, that will help. But also, your damage will be very high. Like I said, just using Assert for Blood, Pyre, and Call Skeleton Horde, your damage as a group geared Necro is going to be pushing 200k. And that's not counting the ADPS you're adding through your synergy, or Assert for Blood synergy. And the fact that Mind Erosion is a group mana tap. If you're in a melee group, with a Shaman, their epic doesn't add anything to your dots. There's a lot of crit stuff that doesn't add to dots, just to nukes or melee. It's going to be hard. Look for caster groups and you'll do better. So I guess next I will kind of show you my particular setup for playing a Necromancer. I have 6 hotbars, 3 of which I use a lot. The first one is kind of when I'm not casting spells, I'm not burning, it's got attack on, pet swarm. Pet swarm is if I used Call Skeleton Army or Call Skeleton Horde now. I want to send those to the next mob to come in, and the next, so they'll be more efficient. Sometimes mobs die fast enough that your horde is still around. Scent to Thule, Encroaching Darkness, Pestilent Paralysis. Pet Back Off is just a little hotkey for if I want to send in a pet to pull. I can use this to save the pet. Dying Grasp, 60,000 heal. It's also a tap, but I use it for an emergency heal. This line is all pretty much emergency stuff. A Bomber's Carapace, 450,000 point rune. Harm Shield. You're a Necromancer. You're not the tank. You don't need to hold aggro. Feel free to, if you start taking damage, hit Harm Shield. You can always pop it off when you need. Death Piece, Death's Effigy. This is just a little hotkey I use to bounce past mobs, in particular see-invis mobs, Whisper Wind. Then it hits Death Piece. Sit, in this case, makes me stand up. I cast Cloak of Shadows. There I am. It's just a little utility. Levant, use that to get out of the area. It's a self-only port, evac. This is Whisper Wind, similar to Step Invis, but just like when I'm kiting and I want a little bit of extra space between me and the mob. Cloak of Shadows, Invis versus Undead. Use the self-only Invis versus Undead unless you really want to invis the group, because this one is essentially instant, might be a half second, and the perfected invis, which is the one for the group, is a cast. So when you're kiting and you want to be a quick invis, you're going to use your self only. Rods, Blood Magic, Death Bloom. Death Bloom is essentially the Shaman canny. Instead of getting the mana back once, you get it over a period of time. Every tick, it'll give you a certain amount of mana. But 15,000 health, 50,000 mana. Same with the Shaman canny. Blood Magic is equivalent to spiritual channeling for the Shaman, in that you can cast spells using your health and not mana. Couple little pet buffs, Frenzy Dead and Fortified Companion, for if I'm pet tanking or I want to give my pet a boost. You've got Swarm of Decay, Rise of Bones, Wake the Dead. Don't use those. It kind of annoys some people. There's two reasons to use it. One, you're with a mage and he's using his Of Many spell. Then that will help him do more DPS. Worthwhile. Arguably, you could use them to slow down a mob. Say you're kiting a mob and he's coming after you, throw a few after them, might slow him down. But these guys don't do any significant damage, in my opinion now. Your one swarm that's worthwhile is Call Skeleton Horde. Use that all the time. Men Companion. Okay, this is my burn line. I've gone over that before. I didn't mention the robe. The robe procs consuming magic. That's a dot, more damage, life burn, etc. Destruction glyph will be more useful once I get closer to being max AA. This one here has a few more pet buffs, pet useful stuff. Silent casting, a hotkey for snare pulling. Dire Charm, Dead Mez, and Fear Storm. These are all great if you're toying with undead, like Tower of Frozen Shadows. You can mez mobs, you can short mez mobs, sort of sun them for a certain amount of, and charm up to, I think, a 113 or lower undead creature. So, fun. Not going to use that too often, but maybe your pet dies. Boom, hit the charm. Embrace the Decay. You can use that to cure Restless Ice, because it not only cures stuff, but it also has a 95% chance to remove one detrimental effect. It's powerful, and it's self-only, but use it. DMF. Mortifier Unity is your unity of buffs. There's two other buffs you're going to want to use. You're going to want to use Shield of Destiny, which is a rune. Sorry. A melee guard rune, Shield of Destiny, and you're also going to want to use Frozen Skin. The advantage of Frozen Skin is it's going to give you a rune, but also increases your mana regeneration. It says mana regeneration rate by 0. It's actually, I believe, 25. You can check that. And is there anything else? I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. Those are your self buffs. Over summon remains, summon corpse, especially summon range. Use that. Don't ever pay for a to summon your body for you. And as a necro, it recycles like every minute or something, so you can actually summon a party. Your 93% res, some gates, um, my charm. Holgrish Elder Beads. I own one Holgrish Elder Beads, and I tend to pass it from character to character depending on who I think wants it most right then. Right now, I'm playing with the Necro. Use Staunch Recovery. A lot of people hold off and never use that, especially on raids. You know, we've just died or something. Go ahead and use it. By the time the next raid rolls around, it'll pop up. Not the next raid, but next week rolls around, it'll popped up again. The same with Expedient Recovery. Use that. You know, use your veteran things. You will appreciate using them far more than saving them. That's it for me and the Necromancer. I hope some of this advice was helpful. Um, Certainly, you know, it's not perfect, but it's going to give you an overview of the class and hopefully a starting point. You can go out and research your own, and you can find those areas that you disagree with me on, and that is fine. I'll talk to you guys later. Take care.